Okay, so today we are going to go over once again the object management workbench. And so we're just going to go through some of it. You're welcome to follow along. For this first part, you don't have to. There will actually be two recordings today. One's what we call the object management workbench tour, and then there will be a demonstration later. So first off, when we open Solutions Explorer, there is a direct menu exit under the tools category. We can get there to go to OMW. We can type OMW in the fast path to get there, or we can actually get there by calling the tree-based menu object management workbench, which if you pause over one of these long enough, it shows you the actual application. So OMW workbench is actually this P98-220, and they typically run the ZJDE version of it. And if you wanted to, you could actually go into OMW Workbench and check out and look at the design of OMW Workbench. So that's kind of a phenomenal capability just right there, talking about the software, that it's actually the tool was created in the tools themselves. So it's kind of cool there. So we're going to go into OMW Workbench. And again, you can follow if you like. And of course, I probably should have opened it earlier so that it wouldn't be too much of a delay. So, okay, so first of all, let me talk about this. There are basically four main areas of the OMW Workbench. This left side is considered the project view. Down this middle, there are things called the action buttons. Then there's the news and status tab. And then there's the search tab. And so when you first encounter the object management workbench, the news tab will be displayed. A lot of times you'll see there is a capability where there is a URL you can attach to this, but I have yet to see any client bother with it to where when you open this up, you can tell which company this is opening for. This is pretty much just abandoned at that point, okay? Now, so the first thing we want to do is talk about the project view. And the project view allows you to access projects. So all the projects will be in here. The best way to, is just do find on there, and all modifications of reports, versions, applications, table conversions, and all should be done inside a project. Okay. Now, we will set up a project such that all the objects that require modification or creation for a specific task or project all stay in the same project just for grouping capability, because we don't necessarily want those objects to be out of the control of the people working on that particular project. So if I want to use a modify a business function, I'll bring the business function in the project and leave it in here. And if someone else wants to use it, they can wait till I'm completely done with that and all the other objects I'm working on to access it. Otherwise, things can get messed up really quickly. And there are cases where we will share the ability to work on different projects, and we'll talk about that tonight. Okay, so now the filter fields up here are pretty much user role and status, and the user defaults will default to the user that you've logged in as. Now, you might notice that yours is different than mine in that mine says Ben Long on it, the name. And that's because I've connected this address book person to the username demo that I've logged in as. What does either of yours say, by the way? Either one of you?
The user's demo.
Yeah, the user's demo. Or what, does it have a associated description over here?
Financial distribution company.
Financial distribution company. Okay. So, and you can actually determine what that is by under, let's see if I can remember where it is. Actually, if you go back to, went back too far, Solution Explorer, if you go back to Solution Explorer here and go to View User Options, and then User Profile Revisions, you can see that the address number here for me is 1234. And if I go look up 1234, that is Ben Long for me. Now, what did you say yours was, Chris?
Financial / distribution company. Yeah.
So it was address number 1 is what shows up in yours. So if you want, just for grins, find another address number and put it in there. And then you'll see the next time you open up OMW, it'll have a name. And for that matter, you could actually add your name into address book and then attach it here so that the demo project would bring up your name. Completely valid to do that. So now let's talk about this. The user, again, is whoever you are logged in as. And if you wanted to change that, you could If you wanted to see what other available users there are, you could look in here. And so there are other default projects here that are other people's logins. And so the ones that are marked default is JDE INSP. I assume that's JDE Inspector, JDE, the VS 5948423, the IC and the TW ones here are all default projects of other logins. And if you wanted to see what was in them, you can certainly open up the projects. So now, if we open up ours, we have owners. And under owners, we have who owns different projects. And that would also be the role. So you could filter on all projects based on the role type, like developer. So if I look up if I wanted to look up like what are any of them are managers, I could put in 03 and see that demo is always going to show up because it's my login. But this IC default will have someone set up as a manager. So that is one way of filtering, is by role. Now I can tell you right now that rarely use that. I have used it in some cases where I was acting as a QA person for certain projects, and I could narrow down the immense number of projects I had like that. So that's what the role is used for. Let's see, the status field. So the status field, if you notice this 21 here, is a status of the project. And a lot of clients will have your default name in there, role blank, and then something like 21 through 26. And it'll tell you just which projects fall within that. And the idea is that each project has a life cycle. And typical life cycle will be that when you create a project, it starts at 21. And then there can, once it wants to go to quality assurance, it could go to a 26 and then go to a 28 when they want to move the objects up to prototype in order for people to test it. And then you might go to another 36, I think 36 project status, which says quality assurance has okayed this, it's ready to go to production. Then they'll build a production package after moving it to a 38 status. And I have some clients where I have almost 100 projects, and I don't want to filter through those. The only ones I really care about are the ones that are at a 21 status or 26 status. So it helps me only display the projects that really matter to me. So that's the importance of having those status. So I want to talk about the advanced search. So over on the search form, you have the ability to look at different types of objects. Now, all of the classic objects that you have been introduced to are considered classic object librarian objects. And if we go to the add button, I can show you all the objects that show up at once, and all of the object librarian objects like interactive applications, batch applications, the associated versions, business functions, data structures, tables, business views, media objects, and business function libraries are all something that would be looked at under object librarian category. Okay. Then you have control table type objects, which would be like data items, data. When I go to data dictionary, I'm looking at data items. And when I type in UDCs, I'm looking at user defined codes. And those are what are called, fall into the category of control table objects. Okay. Then there's workflow processes, which is the only item under workflow category. Projects, which fall under object management workbench category. You have solution explorer objects, which are, the solution explorer is basically these type of menu entries here are solution explorer objects, and this is considered menu items and tasks. So tasks and task relationships. And then when we get into BI Publisher, we have two types of objects for BI publishers. One is report definitions, and one is XML publisher objects. Now, those will show up as two different categories when we look it up in the search. And then there's business service development objects. So we're going to look at those for a second here. If we look at, so there are the report definitions, and if I type in like R star, so under report definitions, these are actual objects that are already exist out there. Those are report definitions. And then the other BI publisher thing are called XML publisher objects. And those can be just about any name, usually a T or an R for templates. And we'll be talking about those soon, but those are different kinds of objects. And know that when you're looking at them, in order to put them into a project, you have to go to places other than the object librarian. Now, just to give you a little history, before the object management workbench was created, we used to have to work from something called the object librarian. And that's how we dealt with the classical objects before OMW was originally built. So. So, um, okay, so if you wanted to search for projects, you don't necessarily have to search by these boxes here. We can actually go to form and search, advanced search here, or there happens to be a hot link here where you can just click and go to advanced search. And we're going to do that real quick. So if I wanted to see what I can see, I can do a find wide open and it would show me just about each and every object that exists currently. And it's going to take a while. And if you look here, you can specify what object type. So I am going to look for projects and see what projects are. Do I have the option of looking for projects? Doesn't look like I do. Um, no, okay. So let's see what the form advanced search, it must take us to a different area. This advanced search over here on the hotkey must filter by the category and search type. So yeah, this is looking at a different screen where I can look at all the objects related to my projects. So it has the projects here. And if I wanted to return, if I wanted, this shows basically all my projects. And if I wanted to select just specific ones, I can hold my left control key down while clicking on them. And when I go back to select, this will have loaded it over on the right. It'll display it only the ones that I highlighted in addition to my project. Now, what the value of that is, I'd have to really think about. If you know ahead of time what the project names are, it will certainly give you an area, a way to display only those projects. Now, if I clear out my filter fields here and then go to advanced search, it'll probably send me a couple more that I couldn't see before. And notice that when I return, they're all displayed there along with my default project. So there's one thing you can do with that advanced search. Okay. Now, I also have the ability to search by object. And so if I want to see all the projects that have a certain object in them, and what is one of the projects I've worked on is the R55 group. If I select that, it'll tell me the projects that contain it. So that's another way I can narrow down. If I know what object I want to work with, I can put that in the advanced search by object, and it'll give me the project that contains that. It'll display it. Now, so that's the project area. Now the action buttons are these buttons that appear here in the middle. And they represent the actions allowed by a specific user. Like right now, since my demo is highlighted and I'm a developer, these are the actions that are available to me as a developer. So if a specific user role like quality assurance is not allowed to perform an action, that button will not appear here. So for example, this button is not available to us. This is the get button, and it's if I want to download the specs to my local machine, I would highlight an object and press the get button. The reason it's not available to us is because since all our objects are in a demo environment, they're all already checked out. And so there's no, well, it disables the ability to load the local environment with the specs because there's no development, prototype, or production environments with which to pull the specs from. So now if an action button is not active, the action can't be performed. Now, as example, if I hover over the check-in button, nothing happens. It's not an active button. So there's no hover help and it doesn't pop up, where if I hover over the checkout button, you'll see that it kind of pops up for me and the hover information works for me. Now, no, I better not do it. We're not going to check out anything right now. Check in, check out. Okay. Notice when I highlight a project, I have the advanced project button, which would allow me to move the project status to a higher value. But it has to be a valid value, and part of the valid rules. Probably shouldn't have clicked that because there's probably no valid rules. They probably just want you to keep everything at a 22 or a 21, excuse me, a programming. Now I'm going to go to the visual assist and it'll filter on, hey, the valid things that I can do are changing it to a status 11, QA test review to a 26, or canceled to a 91. There are a whole bunch more project statuses, but these are the only ones that are available to me in the demo environment. So there we have it. If I actually do a 26 and tab out and validate only and say, okay, we'll see what happens. It's thinking. And object status error on status change. So it gave me an error. And we won't go into searching that anymore right now, but. Okay, so there's the change project status. The one below it is called the switch token. And under very special cases, we have the ability, like a project manager, to temporarily move an object from one project to another for various reasons, like emergency, something that suddenly takes priority, or maybe the project owner of the project that it's in is on vacation and they really need to work that object and can't wait for that person to come back from vacation or something like that. So they will switch the token from the project it's currently in to whatever the new project is. And the nice part about that is when that object then gets released, it'll be automatically returned to the project that it was just taken from. And just to remind you guys, the token is basically the rights to make changes to it. Okay. Now, a developer can do this. Oh, it doesn't highlight for me. Can use this button quite a bit. If you were to release the token to give someone else the opportunity to work an object, you can highlight the object and then hit release. Right now, it looks like that's not a valid action in the demo environment. And then the next button below is erase checkout. And so the checkout means I have the specs loaded from the environment up on the server, they've been pulled down. I have the specs down here and I have the current specs, and I am allowed to make changes to it, and nobody else can do anything with it except look at the specs until I check this back into the environment up above, up on the server. Okay, I already talked about check in and check out. The empty button is get. That is just a hand which will bring the specs down it'll basically check it out and then erase checkout. If you were to do a checkout and erase checkout, so these two buttons would result in the same specs being loaded onto your machine as the get button here. The design button, we've seen that quite a few times. This is based on certain objects. By the way, when you go into design, it's dependent upon the type of object that's been highlighted over here on the left. So if I highlight a UBE template and go to design, it will take me to the batch application design set of tabs where it has start report design aid. But if instead I highlight, let's see, a table and go into design, it will take me out to the design table and that set of tabs. So it takes me, it's a very focus dependent, it takes me to different areas. Where if I go to a regular application, it'll take me to form design, interactive application design, and then starts form design aid. And if I highlight business views, there's a set of tabs, business view design, which will take me to business view design. So that's what the design button does. Now, outside the demo environment, our FAT clients will typically get the latest updates. And so we have to make sure that we save our objects. And I've already shown you where we can save them in a different system and save it off as a PAR file. And there are other cases where clients will want you to save them to a play environment that holds all the saved objects. I've already talked in the past about the development environment, prototype environment, production environment. There's also what's called a pristine environment, which is a untainted environment, sort of like development, or before development gets any changes or the like. And you can usually, a lot of times for clients, you can save the specs off to that environment as well. And you can restore them from an environment in the same way, perform a restore. And we can also do that with the PAR files. So, and then we have, in a separate box by itself, we have the arrow buttons, and those are how we move objects in and out from our object librarian into our projects, or from our projects just out of our projects using these arrow buttons. Any questions on that so far? Now, the new status tab. I'm going to highlight a report and then go to news and status, and it's going to give me all kinds of information about this object. It'll tell me name, description, what type it is, what release the object is, product and report codes, the path code where it's found, which because we're in demo junior, it'll always be in demo. It tells us what project it exists in. And is this project inheriting the token for this object? And the answer is no, because it already holds the token, so there's no inheriting to be involved. And it's hard to tell from this, but this little box right here should be colored the same as one of these three options. And this tells me that this object is currently checked out. If I were to find one that's not checked out, let's see if I can. You'll see that this box is different. So that's kind of a little visual that it's not checked out. But then so is this icon over here, kind of tells us the same thing. So it's kind of redundant. Now I'm going to highlight a user-defined code, and you're going to see that the news status is a little different for that. And you can, well, I guess you can't see anything other than the summary tab for non-object librarian objects, but I think you can see token info for the object librarians objects. Also, if you happen to have an owner highlighted, then it gives you a little different news and status regarding the owner status. I don't know if there's no, there's no. So. Now, over here, since I talked about the icon over here, I want you to notice that each one represents a different type of object, like the globe is an application. The f of x is a business function. We have see these icons are not correct. So I don't know what happened to those. I mean, I know I've created some business views in this. It's interesting that the business view icon is hosed up, and I've only ever seen that in the past when the system has been corrupted. So if you go to the directed exercise, page 191 will show you the other icons. that are kind of missing from here, both the object librarian items, icons, and then the non-object librarian objects. And there's some of them have actually changed from the time that these exercises first came out to 9.2 that you're looking at in the demo machine here. So in the search screen, you've got all kinds of search capability. I've pretty much shown you all of that, so I'm not going to go over it again. I think we're at a good point to call it, to say, are there any questions?